Hello everyone, welcome back to another review and painting video. In this video, we're going to be looking at some miniatures by Hat. They were kind enough to send these over to me. This is World War I 172 miniatures. So these are Italian miniatures specifically. It includes a D-port 75 millimeter gun as well as artillery crew for them. So what you see here on the left of the unpainted figures and on the right, with the exception of the horse, are the figures that I painted and how they look at the end. I painted them on the sprue, which I'll show you in a second. I had a pretty good time painting them. I was a little bit back and forth on like what colors I should use, but ultimately I think I ended up in a good spot that mimics what you see on the box. Went with some brown bases for them. The artillery crew set does not come with a horse, but it does come with a rider in a figure in a riding position. So Hat was also kind enough to send me over one of their German field wagons in 172 scale that comes with horses, and I just threw them on one of those. That will be for another video. So for today, we're just going to focus on the Italian crew. What I wanted to do just quickly was show you what the sprues look like. So this is real quickly, this is what the D-port gun looks like. You get 4 of these in the box that you can assemble. And in the artillery crew set, you get 4 of these figures on the sprue. So you get 8 figures in different poses. Pretty much, they're all different poses, no repeats, and a couple extra little things like some shells, an extra head if you want to do a head swap, as well as a tree stump, a signpost, a shovel, and just like a box, a couple random like things that might be in an artillery encampment inside of a trench in World War One. So it's pretty cool. I'll show you a closer look at these in just a second, each of the figures, but we'll then go through and I'll show you my method for painting these up on the sprue. So this is my first time working with any of Hat miniatures. They are pretty unique in the sense that they don't give you any instructions. It's like any extra paperwork. All the instructions are actually on the back of the box. So this is my first time partnering with Hat. It's my first time handling their miniatures, assembling them and painting them. And I am not like a great model builder, especially at 172 scale. I just have like fiddly fingers. I'm more of a painter, but I did find these pretty enjoyable and easy to put together. So the D-port gun, like I said, comes on one sprue and you get 4 of them in the box, which opens on the side, which I think is pretty nice. It's like different than what you see from most manufacturers with model kits. The instructions are on the back, like I said, and it's fairly simple to clip these pieces off and assemble it. I did some dry fitting before I glued the pieces together, and they go together pretty seamlessly. You do have to do a little bit of cleanup sometimes with like the holes. Sometimes, like in my experience with them, like I had to enlarge the holes a little bit with an X-Acto blade, but just normal modeling stuff that you have to do, like some cleanup from the mold line and, shaving off any of the excess that you clip off from the sprue tree itself. So when it was all done, before I painted it, this is one that I assembled that is not cleaned up. It gives you a good idea of the size and like the finishings on it. So like I did not clean up the sides along the edge here, and the gun itself does just sort of snap into the center here. On the one I painted, I was a little bit rougher with it, so it doesn't sit as snugly, but this is pretty much good to go. The wheels are not glued in this one specifically, or are they? I can't remember now. No, I did glue these wheels. I didn't glue the wheels in the one I painted. And if you wanted to, you could leave them unglued and they would roll just fine. But, like I said, I'm not like a great modeler, so I found these like to be a little bit cumbersome for me. I mean, the 172 scale does take a certain type of person to handle and build and paint. So if this is like your scale, if you love fiddling with little things and building them and having like very accurate representations of field artillery, like this is a really cool little piece. Like I do like it now that it's built, but I'd be honest that I don't love building little things like this. I'm just impatient. I'd rather get to painting. So that being said, the painted version I kept very simple with just a little bit of brown for the wood of the wheels, and then used primarily a gray green color over the whole thing. And I tried to do some micro scratching, but for this particular build, I kept it fairly simple because I wanted to just see how it all looked and turned out. And with the figures, which I'll show you at the end, I think they look really good together. It's a nice, simple artillery piece that that for the like, I don't know what the price is, but I don't think it's more than 20 bucks. You get 4 of these deep work guns. So then you have to buy the crew separately. So those do, like, that is a factor. You have to buy crew separately. But if you just want the deep work guns, you get 4 of them in the box, and they're super simple to figure out and put together. The instructions, like I said, very straightforward, just where things go. And you can dry fit it all together very easily, but it does recommend you use some glue. And for that, I would recommend Tamiya Extra Thin Cement. Okay, next we're going to look at the artillery crew. They do come on a sprue of 8 figures with some extra bits, like I had mentioned. You get 2 standing poses, 4 kneeling poses, one guy sitting with no base, and one guy who looks like he could be riding on a horse. So like I said, I used the horse from a separate set that Hat sent over. They also give you a shovel, a signpost, a stump, and some boxes, and whatever these are intended to be. I'm not really sure. There's also additional shells and some casings, some spent casings, and this artillery, or this crewman's extra head. So I guess if you wanted to really get fiddly with it, you could chop off one of the figure's heads and replace it with this guy. He's also wearing a different hat than everyone else. It looks like more like it might be a metal helmet compared to the rest, who are all wearing cloth hats. So they have good detailing overall. It looks like you can kind of make out a mustache on this guy. And then this guy in particular has some pretty big Dumbo-y ears, which I thought was pretty funny. Overall, there's good sculpting of the cheekbones and the eye sockets, so you get some nice recesses if you want to apply a wash to the painted figures. The plastic is different than the deep work gun. The deep work gun is a harder plastic, which I felt was easy, like made it easier to snap apart and put together. Whereas these figures are that softer, a bit waxier, soapier plastic, which makes them a bit harder to paint. Sometimes the paint doesn't adhere quite as nicely. The primer sometimes can rub off easily. So you just have to be a bit more careful with that. It's also harder to clean up mold lines on this type of plastic, but thankfully these really don't have any. Like, luckily they connect at the base here, which I think is perfect for when you're painting these. You just keep them on the actual sprue tree and then paint around them and clip them off when you're done. You'll see that in the painting process that I'm going to go through. So real quickly, I'll show you just how these look in hand, like this particular one standing up. I think I could do even more refinements to the paint job. I was really just experimenting with the Italian paint scheme that I had, trying to mimic the box as best as possible. And I think I got pretty close. It did take me a few attempts to try to really get that grayish green color in a good spot. I started with gray green, and ultimately I thought it was too gray. So I ended up using a different color, which you'll see in the video. So let's get into the painting guide now, and we'll look at everything all together in a round table afterwards. Okay, so the very first thing I do is prime them. In this case, I used Vallejo Black Spray Paint Primer. Then, using my new scrubber brushes from Hobby Lobby, I painted gray-green over all of the raised areas of fabric and cloth, and then I just made sure I didn't get into any of the dark recesses that the primer applied, so it kind of gives me a natural shadow. And I did this in sort of like a dry brush fashion. The brush was a little wet, but I really just made sure that I was going over all of the raised details so I could use the color to create the highlights. Then after the gray-green was down, I decided it really wasn't green enough, so I mixed in a bit of German uniform into that gray-green mixture, and that started to bring it up into like a more like warm mid-tone that I wanted. It still wasn't exactly the right color, but it was getting a lot closer. Next, I broke out my red leather from Vallejo Model Color, and I began painting all of these various straps that are pictured in the box art, that same red leather brown. It was a little bit more red than probably the box art was, but that's what the wash will do later, is sort of tone that down. I used beige red for all of the flesh tones, and I just kept them all Caucasian color for simplicity in making this fast. But you know, you can definitely add in darker colors as you'd like to vary the various skin tones. It's always fun to add in a bit of warmer reds and browns to make the skin color variations differ more widely. I also did a base coat of the same red leather over the bases of each of the figures, and then I went over that again later after I give them a wash to really bring it back up. I honestly could have skipped the wash phase, but I feel that it does a good job of tying in all of the colors and toning down the browns a bit. I end up going back in a little bit with olive green over all of the uniform again to bring up the more green saturation I wanted and match that box art a bit better. But you know, you can use your own wash as you like. You can use either a brown, or I'm actually using a sepia color here because it's not quite as dark as the umber wash that I have. You can also mix your own. Once the wash was dry, it was time to go back over all of the various places that I had missed spots and start to do some touch-ups and really bring up the colors and contrast a bit more. I began by painting burnt red over all the bases, and I really liked how the warm tone of the base offset against the cool tones of the uniform. Now I'm using olive gray, not olive green, I apologize, and my 2.75 magnification glasses to really get in there and just pick out all the raised folds of fabric and bring up those highlights more and make them really just a bit more saturated so they match that box art more closely. The final step is to clip them off with my little clippers here and then go through and paint over any of the details that may have been worn away from that clipping. So all the areas where the figure meets the flashing. Thankfully though, because most of these were attached at the base, there wasn't a ton of that cleanup work to do. So I painted the deep work gun very simply, just as I did the figures, but this was even easier because I left everything on the sprue and then assembled it all afterwards, and then just did some touch-ups where the bits of flashing connected to the actual sprue tree, and I think it turned out really nice. This was a very pleasant way of painting since everything was just flat on the sprue already. I didn't have to work around any weird curves or details after it was assembled. So once both sides were painted, I snipped off all of the individual pieces and began dry fitting everything together. The process, like I mentioned, isn't perfect. Some of the holes aren't like perfectly circular. You need to go in with a bit of like a sharp object. I use an X-Acto knife and just open up those holes a little bit so everything fits in snugly. You don't want to go too much, just like trim away a bit of the flashing. I had pretty much that same problem where every little connector point was, but you can see me here using the X-Acto knife to just get in there and dig out a little bit away of that, like a little bit away from that actual like hole, and then able to puncture the pieces, and they fit pretty nicely together. Some of the pieces of the deep work gun were a little bit finicky. This one in particular, where it's meant to rest on the beam there, and then I glued it to the actual plating, and it was a bit of back and forth and a bit fiddly, more fiddly than I like when it comes to model building. But you know, it's part of it, and the result is nice at the end. This probably would have glued a bit better and quicker had I done it to the bare plastic, because I'm using Tamiya extra thin cement, and that adheres to the cement, it basically cements the plastic together. But when you get the paint in the mixture, it's got to first eat away at the paint, so it takes it a bit longer. This is the final look of it. I went back in and did a little bit of micro scratching with some light green gray again, and it really just, you know, made it pop a little bit more. But because the gun itself is so simple, I didn't go too crazy with the weathering and texturing, and I really wanted to, you know, give you an example of how this can be done quickly and to good result. Okay, so some final thoughts. I kind of gave you my impressions of building the deep work gun. Wasn't my favorite part of the build or anything, but I really did enjoy figuring out the painting process for these figures. I definitely like olive gray over green gray mixed with German uniform as the final result. This was very experimental from the offset, because I just have never painted Italian troops before, and I wasn't sure how much detail to get in there, but I did want to paint them as quickly and efficiently as possible, so I could kind of get them in front of you and give you my impressions of hat miniatures and how they paint up overall. I think there is good detail there if you want to really take your time and focus in, get laser focused, and add more paint detailing to the uniforms and to the faces. There is detail in the sculpts to do that. The gun, it's like the deep work gun is a fun little gun to have on the tabletop. I mean, it feels very like in scale with the figures. The weapons themselves and the actual detailing on the figures is pretty minimalistic. So these types of troops get painted up incredibly quickly. Like two of them are carrying the ammunition, and the rest are just sort of doing hand motions. One's on the phone, one has some binoculars, but other than that, you know, you're not painting a bunch of individual guns or anything like that. And the artillery crew paint up very quickly. So the next question, the next thing I'm asking myself is like, what do I do with these remaining figures I have? And I have been thinking about creating like a little diorama, World War I diorama, but I'm going to need more figures, I think, to really build that out and to create an interesting scene. So it might be in my future to go ahead and buy some more Italian infantry from Hat, and maybe even find some baddies for them to fight in the trenches. I've never built a World War I trench, but that seems to be like a hobby must for most of the people building, like doing anything historical. I see tons of great examples of how to build trenches and battlefields, war-torn battlefields specifically. And that's all sounds very exciting to create like some little vignettes of and do some of like storytelling within those small enclosed spaces, because you get like these little battles that happen. And doing them at this scale means you can fit a lot more figures on if you really want to. I want to give a huge shout out to Hat again for sending these over. I'm excited to paint more of them in the future. I'm excited to paint the field wagon for a future video. So please like and subscribe if you want to see that. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this tutorial. Is it helpful? Do you want to see me paint anything else specifically from Hat's 172 miniature range in World War I or in another historical setting? Let me know what's your favorite in the comments. Thank you again for watching. Be sure to share this with your dad. Have a great day.